Hello and welcome to Adoption Pop. We're a podcast journalist,
a filmmaker,
and a cultural critic versus pop culture's favorite adoption tropes.
Because we're adopted.
Hey, Kristal, you took a DNA test on camera for your film Because She's Adopted. What was that like?
Every time the clip comes to me spitting into the little thingy, I just cringe. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that in public. I can't believe that, like, there's public footage of me, like, spitting. So I originally had taken Ancestry, and then afterwards I went and bought every single other DNA test that you can buy and did all of those just in case, like, my long lost sister was connected to one of those and not Ancestry. So
okay.
Yeah.
Well, many adoptees today, including the three of us, know a little something about spitting into tubes, though Kristal is the only one of the three of us that have done so on camera. But so too does the Tony and Emmy award-winning star of the stage and screen, Kristin Chenoweth, who is also a U.S. Baby Scoop era adoptee. Chenoweth was featured on an episode of the PBS documentary series Finding Your Roots, where host Henry Louis Gates presents her with a book of life, consisting of information researched and compiled by professional genealogists, photos, newspaper clippings, and other ephemera documenting Chenoweth's familial lineage and ancestral history. All of this sounds to me like an adoptee fantasy show. Haley, what did you think of this episode of Finding Your Roots?
I was trying to think if I'd ever seen this series before. I think I've seen an episode or two, but it's been forever. And so while I was watching it, it's actually the big reveal at the end where they give them like the full visual family tree that I was like, wouldn't that be nice? Like, that's just what I was thinking. I was thinking, wouldn't that be nice to actually have all of your real genetic relatives represented in a visual fashion like that? And I remember when my first son was born, he was given a Bible by his adoptive grandparents, and it had a family tree in the front, and my adoptive mother filled it in. And that made me really upset because I was like, a tree does not represent just with these two ancestors. That doesn't represent the totality of my child's history and lineage. Kristal, what did you think when you were watching this?
I thought I should be more interested in this than I am. I feel like I should care more, but I just didn't. I don't know. This was probably the most dull piece of media that we've done to date. And I don't know.
What?
Yeah, I don't know. I know.
Oh my God. I felt like I was watching a documentary and I thought, oh, Kristal's going to love this.
Surprise. I didn't. I don't know. Like, I don't really know Kristin Chenoweth. So, like, I didn't feel like a connection to her in any way. And maybe the family tree is a sore spot for me, which I think it is. We can get into that a little bit later.
Kristal, were you more... So each episode, Henry Louis Gates profiles two celebrities. We're, of course, only going to talk about Kristin Chenoweth as the adopted person in this. But the other person in her episode is Spike Lee. And so I'm curious, like, were you more in... I'm trying to understand your feedback, Kristal, whether it's you didn't feel personal connection to Kristin Chenoweth, or it's like the actual format of the show that just wasn't your thing. Like, were you more interested in Spike Lee's storyline?
Wait, will I get in trouble if I say that I fast forwarded through his storyline?
Get in trouble from whom? From whom?
From either
Sullivan.
one of you. You know what? I think it was the format, because I did try and watch some of his, and his was a little bit more captivating, I will say. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't find it like riveting at all.
Well, I think we're all entitled to our opinions, Kristal. I am rethinking our intro and outro where I tout your skills as a filmmaker, knowing that you're fast forwarding through Spike Lee and his background and those kinds of things, but it's okay.
Yeah, I knew I was going to get in trouble. But I did find him more interesting, but it was just kind of like, yeah, I don't know. Tell me more about Kristin Chenoweth, because I don't know really much about her. I mean, certainly it's cool that like she finds out things about her family that are, that are similar to her, like who she is and what she does and is interested in. So I like, that's kind of cool, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just not shocked by these things anymore.
Yeah, I do think there is an aspect of finding your roots that presumes an underlying interest in whoever it is being covered, because I do think this show is a little navel gazy for the individual celebrities. I think one of the things that is interesting, at least interesting to me, that may be interesting to our pop stars, is, to my knowledge, so this show's been on for 12 seasons. I, like Haley, have only seen a couple of episodes. I have not seen 12 seasons worth of this show. But, typically you don't have adoptees on the show. And here we have someone who really doesn't know anything much, about their family, really beyond her biological parents. And Kristin Chenoweth, as I said at the top, is a U.S. baby scoop era adoptee. She was born and raised in Oklahoma by her same race adoptive parents, but has had an incredibly successful career on Broadway, and also in television and movies. Maybe for those who don't regularly make it to Broadway, perhaps most famous for her role as the original Glinda in Wicked, the Wicked production on Broadway, and also famous for a recurring role in The West Wing for many years, again, as well as other television shows and movies, and certainly Broadway. So that's her background. She's known for having perfect pitch, also, and quite an incredible singer. What I thought was really interesting, and maybe Haley, I'll look to you because I think that you are somewhat familiar with Kristin Chenoweth's career and arc. I was also interested in watching this because, so far as I knew before seeing this, Kristin Chenoweth did not talk a lot about biological family in the media. That was my impression before seeing this episode. I've since gone back and done some research. But Haley, was that talk about how you came to this episode and sort of your knowledge of Kristin Chenoweth and her background?
All I know is from Wicked, playing Glinda. I have heard her voice many times when I play that soundtrack on repeat. And I think guest appearances on Glee. Not that I watched all of Glee, but certainly that's like Broadway musical theater. That's definitely where I know her from. When you said West Wing, I was like, what? I've never seen that either. So I didn't know that. So
I watched in COVID. I watched the whole thing during COVID.
Did you really?
Back when we thought COVID was going to be 6 weeks.
Okay. That was your binge show. One of. So when I think of her and her public facing comments about adoption, the only ones I've ever seen are her being very positive about adoption and falling into the classic happy adoptee trope, I'll say. And I know she's a human being and we're not talking about her as a character today, but as Kristin, the human being, adopted person. And so when she talked about her reunion with her birth mother and their connection and how sad she was when she passed, it sounded like they had just over 10 years together. She also mentioned the trauma her mother experienced in relinquishing her. I was like, oh, do you only talk about the positives publicly still because that is all that is palatable to the public? And it really, it made me have a newfound compassion, I guess, for her, because I've absolutely critiqued her in the past for her portrayal of adoption as only good.
Did she have a book that she put out about adoption or something? I feel like I've seen a clip of her that has been kind of raked through the coals by adoptees.
So she's got 3 books. She has a book of like meditations and prayers and that kind of thing. She has a memoir, which I'll talk about her memoir, which is from 2009. And she has a more recent children's book that came out in the last 5 years that talks about adoption. I tried to get my hands on the children's book, and there was only one copy. The New York Public Library only has one copy, and it was I was unable to get my hands on it, on the children's book. But I think that's the book that you're talking about because it involves animals. It's pet adoption, but it's human adoption, but it's pet adoption.
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about, because I think the clip is from a talk show that she did where she was promoting the book, and it was just the consensus was that it was a little bit tone deaf.
But her memoir now would be prior to reunion, because her reunion with her mother was in 2012.
Yeah. So I want to talk about that because, like you, Haley, watching the show gave me a different appreciation. And I recognize, maybe for the first time after watching this episode, that publicly, Kristin's gone on a journey of consciousness. And we talked about this a bit when we did Jersey Shore, when we were talking about Nicole Polizzi, talking about Snooki as well, that just like the 3 of us, these people have come into consciousness. They've done so in the public eye. And I had a real empathy for her in being able to have the space and the understanding perhaps to do that. So I'll read you 2 brief excerpts from her memoir that came out in 2009. One is, she talks about whether or not she's interested in her own origin story. And she says, "I don't know much about my biological mother, only that she was 21 when I was born, a flight attendant who got pregnant by a pilot who had a wife and children. That's the story anyway. And while I'm a curious person by nature, I feel a surprising lack of curiosity about whether it's true. My real mom is Junie Smith Chenoweth." And then in another excerpt about whether or not she wants to have any contact with her biological mother, she says, "Since the question always gets asked, no. I have no interest in contacting or being contacted by my biological mother. I've never felt the slightest frisson of something missing in my life, and the whole medical records thing doesn't concern me much." And so she was 41 when this book came out. 3 years later, she met her birth mother. And thereafter, as it gets closer to 2020, 2023, 2024, her public comments really change quite a bit. And she starts talking about her mothers, plural. In 2023, she was on Ryan and Kelly, and she talks about her reunion with her biological mother, and that her mother said, "I hope you can forgive me." And she said, "You gave me life. Junie Chenoweth gave me a life. I have nothing but gratitude." And then she looked into the audience and she said, "Hi, Mama Lynn." And she said that she has video that she's never shown anyone. It's just for she and her mother.
I think we should also point out that it's alluded to in the episode. I don't know if it's spelled out right, that her sister, I believe, is the one that tests and finds. Is that, am I remembering that correctly? So it wasn't Kristin per se searching, although she had obviously done a DNA test in order for them to match up, but it's the sister that actually sought her out.
She says she talks about this in 2024. There's a video we'll link to it in the show notes, and she says that meeting her sister was a huge benefit, a positive for her, in addition to meeting her biological mother. And she does this a few times. Snap, like it was like this. Snap, meeting biological relatives, and that being connected to biological relatives is just different. And this particular video was after her biological mother passed away. And when she's talking about her biological mother and she's talking about her relationship with her sister, she says, "We lost our mom in August." So again, like her whole language, she still talks about June Chenoweth as being her mother. But now talks about having more than one. And in fact, for her 2026 Mother's Day post on Instagram, the carousel has got both of them in it.
She also says in this episode, it's a powerful thing to know that you're like someone. And I think no matter how, if you get a reunion, no matter how your reunion goes, one of the things that adoptees most want is to see someone who looks like you or see characteristics that you share. Because no matter how alike you are with your adoptive family, if you're lucky enough to fit in that way, it's not the same. And this is what the non-adopted people, you can't comprehend not having any genetic mirrors. And I love that she said that.
Yeah, she says it could have gone either way when she met her birth mother. And then she said that she accepted her for all her rights and all her wrongs. And I love that for her. You know, I love that she felt, to me, that just speaks to safety. You know, she had a sense of safety with her birth mother. And, you know, I think about how I've changed over the years, talking about adoption, how I think about adoption, and, you know, giving ourselves the permission to look at it and think about it in a new way and not beat ourselves up for how we used to think about it or talk about it. And it's kind of neat to hear the evolution of her journey into consciousness.
I feel like I don't think we have seen it in any of the media that we've covered so far in the podcast. And I'm struggling to think of a piece of media even that maybe we haven't covered yet where we see a full arc. You know, we've seen when we talked about Little Bird, we see this kind of like we see like sort of a break or an inciting incident where like suddenly someone is maybe aware in a different way. But even still, that's starting at a certain point. We don't have this full arc of I'm not interested to I am interested, which I feel like is a lot more realistic from an adoptee standpoint. I don't know. I definitely had a period through a lot of my life where I said I wasn't interested outwardly. I think I've always wondered, but for sure there were times where I was like, I don't wonder enough to do something about it right now, which then gets expressed as I'm not interested to people that are not adoptees? I don't know. What about the two of you?
Mine was, I was always interested, but at the beginning, I would absolutely talk about adoption as a totally positive thing and not have any of the nuances that I have now come to understand. So, yeah, Kristal?
Yeah, I was very similar to you, Haley. Always interested, always knew I was going to look and find. But coupling that with, that my adoptive parents were my real parents, and that I was so grateful for the life I was given. And, we talk about the grateful adoptee, and I've been thinking about this lately. I'm not a grateful adoptee. I think I'm just like a grateful human being, Like I think I just kind of naturally am. So whether it's adoption or even the hardships that I've faced that aren't connected to adoption, if that's possible, I don't know. I am grateful. I just that's how I move through my life. But when you read from Kristin's memoir, and she's talking about having no interest whatsoever, do either one of you feel activated inside of you when you listen to that or read that?
When I hear people say things like that, I think, wow, you're really trying to tell yourself you're not interested. And that's not fair to not take it at face value, but I think it's just from the hundreds of adoptees I've spoken to, right, over the years, who would say things like that I used to think that way, and I was really trying to convince myself of that. Like, what's in the subconscious? I want to know what's underneath that.
I think also to say at 41, I don't care about any of the medical stuff. And I'm saying this as a middle-aged, I'm saying this as someone who's like, next year I'll be 50, right? And this idea of one's health and how you think about your own health, as again, I am someone who has the privilege, I've led I've been healthy throughout my life. And to say I'm not worried about any of the health stuff, I think is much easier to say when you're younger and healthy than as you age. I certainly think about it, even though I continue, thankfully, to be, very healthy. I think about it very differently today and what may be in my future than I did 10 years ago and before that, for sure.
Thank you for saying that, because right now I'm 42 and I'm in perimenopause, and not even, I know some brief medical snippets from both sides, but all that withstanding, I'm just like, what happened to you when you went through menopause? Like, I want to know that. Like, and that's not even a disease or something, like.
Going back to how Kristin Chenoweth talked initially about adoption. It's scary to talk about adoption in other ways other than positive. I know that we're kind of like completely desensitized to it. We're like, this is how we feel. We're putting it all out there. But, when I go into new spaces and meet new people and they're like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm an adoptee advocate. I am a filmmaker, and I challenge societal perspectives on adoption. And they're like, what does that mean? And I'm like, well, adoption is trauma. And then you're like, you see the look on their face and you're like, ah, fuck. Right. So it's not easy because the resistance that you get from people is the energy in the room changes. It just does. And that's frightening, because then, like, do you really want to get into it? Like, do you really want to start explaining to them stats and facts? And sometimes I just don't have the bandwidth to do that, and I don't care enough. Like I can tell they don't really want to listen, but it's frightening. So I can understand as like a public person, like someone like her, she probably was treading very lightly, and probably still does.
Well, Kristal, I would say I am not desensitized at all. I don't talk about it publicly. I mean, I don't mean I don't talk about being adopted ever publicly, but like I suspect I am much less free than you are about telling people. It's why you on your website, people can get these gorgeous I love adoptees and because I'm adopted ball caps on your website. You wear them, Haley wears them out in public. There's a reason why I don't have one of your caps. I'm not going to wear that in public. And it's not because I'm not proud of being an adoptee or want to support my friend. It's because I am not interested in the questions. I'm not going to do it. And because also for me, adoption then gets wrapped up in race as well. Like the adoption questions are either followed, like disclosure of being adopted follows for me with one of two questions. Either do you know your real parents, which we've talked about, like the lunacy of that question, or what are you?
Yeah.
And like not interested. And it's because I am so activated by it that I am extraordinarily careful and selective about telling people what I do. If I feel required to disclose something about this podcast, I will say I have a pop culture podcast, and I leave it there.
So while I do wear those hats, I have a beautiful collection. Thank you, Kristal. I should wear them every episode. I do wear them out all the time. Only have ever had one comment on them. And I too am extremely measured in who I disclose to, what I do, because it often starts that whole convo. And it's like, how many spoons do I have for this conversation? And that really determines whether I'm in digital media or I have a podcast where I talk to adoptees about their adoption experience. Like it's very different.
I recently went on a ladies' trip and I only knew one of the ladies, and the other 8 I didn't know. I'd never met before. And of course, we're doing the whole thing. Oh, what do you do for a living? What do you do? And I had a pep talk with myself. And I was like, Kristal, just don't get into it. Like, just do not say anything to say you're a filmmaker. Just don't get into it. Well, I clearly didn't listen to myself because I heard the words coming out of my mouth, adoption abolitionist.
Whoa.
And I was like, Oof. What the heck is wrong with you? In my head, I'm like, and I went back to my room after and I'm like, if you just don't say anything, if you just don't talk, you don't have to feel bad about the things you say. And now all these women think like, oh my gosh, it was one of those moments like, just keep your mouth closed. And so I'll take a page from the both of your books, and hopefully I've learned my lesson. But the looks on their faces, they literally said, but what about all the children? And I'm like, oh God, no. So just so interesting. And yeah, I've only ever gotten positive feedback from the hats. I guess I don't really get activated because maybe when I'm wearing the hat, I'm prepared that I might get a question. But yeah, I think we know really early on in a conversation if somebody's open or they're not, right? So
Well, speaking of getting activated, I want to go back to the episode, and Sullivan explained that the participants are given this book of life with all of this ephemera of their biological relatives, and Kristin is given so, and he asks the participants, he'll be like, here, can you read this section, right? So she's discovering the info for the first time and she's reading it out, so she's kind of a presenter of her own biological relatives. And I remember one very triggering moment in my life with my adoptive mother when I had still, I don't even know if I had one baby or two, but they were still very little. And I don't even know if I had this podcast yet, but she came home from a lunch with my adoptive dad's brother and his family. And so she came home with a manila folder, quite thick, maybe half an inch thick, of paperwork. And the first thing she came and said to me, she was like, oh my gosh, look, like this is all the genealogical research your cousin has done. And this was all on my adoptive, like paternal side. It wasn't even her info. It was her husband's. And I was like, that's not about me. And I was really upset. And she was so confused by my anger, because I didn't ever really get angry about things. Like we're just like a sweep under the family, don't talk about it kind of more. Her and my adoptive dad definitely fought quite a bit, but like everything else was like, we don't talk about this. And she was just like, what do you mean? Like, what? I'm like, I'm adopted. This is not my genetic relatives. Why would I care about all of this stuff, you know? And so that's all I was thinking about when she's flipping these pages. And I just kept thinking back to that manila folder of completely extraneous information to me. Like, I don't care.
100%. I don't care. I had that very experience with my adoptive mother, because when Ancestry came out and she started doing all and oh, we have family, or she'd say, you have family here and you have cousins there and we're going to go visit these cousins and these ones are coming to visit. I'm like, those are not my people. Like, what are you talking about?
One of the things that once I got over being activated, one of the things we find out is that Kristin's dad, I believe, played the wizard in The Wizard of Oz. Am I right in that? Was dad not like a grandparent?
It was someone in the paternal line. I can't recall if it was dad or
anyway,
but yeah.
This is like the big reveal. And I'm like, wow, like that was pretty cool. Kristal, did you have a reaction to that? Or did you not even know that she had been in Wicked? So it's like, why is this?
It was her dad, by the way.
It was. Okay.
It was her dad, yeah.
Yeah, again, like, and perhaps what we're talking about with our adoptive families, like the way that we were supposed to get excited about, you know, all these connections that we had with our adoptive family, and it just kind of fell flat. That's kind of how I felt about like learning about her family lineage, because it was like, this isn't about me, so I don't really care.
Well,
sorry.
That's very honest. That's very honest. And I think there's something to maybe what we've all kind of hinted around at in this episode. It's like, would we want a book of life presented to us with all the facts and items that most people, of course, most people don't know what their great-great-great-grandparents did, but like your parents, your grandparents, maybe your great-great-grandparents, when, if they immigrated, what their jobs were, how many kids they had. Like a lot of us have no idea about that. And because she hadn't reunited with anybody on her paternal side, these are like characteristics she has that, like, where did that come from? Where did that desire to like sing in the adult choir and get a solo come from when you're just like a wee little thing and your family has no interest in music? Like that to me, I was like, oh, I'm so glad she had that doc connected. And yes, there's a feeling of like, oh, I wish someone did do that for me.
Yeah, I think, again, it's something that I don't think non-adopted people fully grasp, because she talks about being so very supported in her love of the theater from being a very small child. Her adoptive family were incredibly supportive of her desire to sing in the choir and all of those kinds of things. But it's about more than just the support to do it. It's seeing her face when she realizes, as you said, Haley, her father was in The Wizard of Oz, just like her. Like her father loved the stage just like her. And I know for me, like, I feel like it's answers I'm never going to get. I think for me, when I reunited with, because I'm reunited only with my paternal side, and that's been wonderful. And it's been wonderful to see people who look like me. And when my sister and I were she's 10 years older, but when we go out in public, people know we're sisters. Like strangers will point us out and recognize us as sisters because we look alike. And that's amazing. and I love that so much. But our father was a musician and he loved music. And I do love music, but like, I don't play any instruments. He played the saxophone. I don't play any instruments. I'm not particularly musical in that way. My sister and my nieces all sing. They're good singers. I cannot sing a note, like, at all. That's not me being self-deprecating. That's me being realistic. I cannot sing a note. Like, I'm a reader and I'm a writer. And I don't think there's anyone on my paternal side, at least that anybody knows, that has that connection at all. So I'm like, am I ever, like, I would love to find the reader and the writer, somewhere. And I don't know if I'm ever gonna get that. And it would be super meaningful, even if it was up the line, to find somebody that had that connection.
Do you feel like you are forced to turn that part of you off, or like that desire off?
The desire for what?
Like you've said in the past, like, I'll probably never get that. Like, I'll probably never get a picture of my birth mother. I'll probably never get, a connection to that. So like, do you feel like you have to turn that part of you off to make it easier, or have you come to like a place of just acceptance?
I think I had to come to the acceptance place when I was like a tiny child, right? Because like I grew up in a household where I knew I was adopted. Like I was told I was adopted. I was taught to be proud, or at least not embarrassed about being adopted. But my adoptive parents also said in no uncertain terms, we are your parents. We're the only parents you have. And so I have always like had to go along with not knowing or not having. And I think at this stage, I know more than I ever thought I would know, even not knowing those parts and pieces. I think what's harder for me is the reaction when I have, friends talk about, giving their children guidance, or children that are like, because my friends' kids now, many of them are like in college or out of college, or like, young adults. And you see this second line, my friend is an attorney and their son is talking about wanting to go to law school, that kind of lineage. And my first instinct is jealousy, and like ugly jealousy on the inside, And I realize right away, I understand right away, like, oh, that's where this is coming from. And so, like, I give myself grace and I readjust my attitude, and like, I can do all the things myself to regulate. But like the first reaction is jealousy for sure. And so like that, I deal with that way more than I sort of deal with like not knowing in my own life.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. Kristin finds out that one of her family members was a slave owner, right? And she handled it graciously, I thought. But it reminded me of some bad news that I found out when I found my family. So when I was looking for my maternal side of my family, I reached out to the Opaskwayak Cree Nation. I did a Facebook post. I said, this was my great-grandmother, great-grandfather. This was my grandmother and my grandfather. And I'm the daughter of so-and-so. And I got such an incredible response. People were like, they had shared the post like over 350 times. Like people commented like, welcome home. I know exactly who your family are. We're cousins. We're this, we're that. Like it was a really amazing experience. And the first time I went back to the OCN, everybody was like, oh yeah, I totally know your family. The second time I went back and I met my great aunts who are still alive, they shared with me that my biological great-grandfather beat my biological great-grandmother to death while she was pregnant. And I mean, it was really difficult news to take. Like it was really hard. And I felt like a bit of a fool because here I am toting around that these are my biological great-grandmother or great-grandmother, great-grandfather, and like coming at it with this like bounding energy that I come into the world with. And, and everybody, I think nobody had the heart like the first few times to tell me the truth. And then when they did, I was grateful that they did. But yeah, it was just a very difficult and confusing thing that was part of my lineage and that. So anyway, that's what that sort of like, it sparked that memory in my mind.
Thank you for sharing that with us. When people ask me about going into reunion, like you don't know what you're going to find. And it isn't just, oh, we're going to find out who we look like and our, characteristics. Like we're finding the humans and all that encompasses. And I feel like it sounded like you were thankful that they spared you from that while you were first acquainting yourself, and then grateful that they did tell you eventually, because then it's like, oh, you're in, you get to know all of it. Is that right? Am I right in that?
Yeah. I think they were so gentle with me. And, just like when we watched Little Bird, right? It was like Bejig knew, or the family knew, like the Indigenous family knew more about what the family separation and trauma had done to her, more so than Bejig had even known yet at that point. And I really felt that way with my family. Like they knew to be tender with me and to take it slow and to honor the experience and to just meet me where I was at.
It reminds me, thinking about their own emotional intelligence and understanding and interaction with you, to think about, again, Kristin, in speaking with Henry Louis Gates, he's a historian, he's a Black historian, And he does, one of his side gigs or one of his gigs is this show. So he does treat his guests with a great deal of empathy and understanding in these conversations. But, I referenced before some of Kristin's interviews and public facing things, which again, we'll link everything in the show notes that we relied on. But, several of the things that I watched, this was not, as in this show, Kristin signing up for something to go and talk about this. This is Kristin getting ambushed by reporters on shows. And she is, she's been in the public eye her whole adult life. So she is incredibly practiced at, the beautiful smile and so gracious. She's Southern also. So gracious with everyone. But I really felt for her in many of these interviews where she's there to talk about one thing and the reporter wants to talk about her adoption. And it's hard, right? It's hard to be ambushed with questions, even well-intentioned questions, because sometimes you don't want to talk about it or you don't want to go there as well. And so I think for, listeners and viewers that are allies, to be able to have that same sort of empathy with all of us that, Kristal, your family had with you, and understanding what you're about to ask or about to say is very hard, is very emotional. And you may think it's just a question and just because you're curious or what have you. But for us, it's got a lot more import and impact.
It's very, very true. It is very true. And something to be so mindful of, because it is, and it's personal too, right? Yeah. Have you two done family trees?
I have a bare bones ancestry tree for both sides.
Yeah, not in any meaningful way. No.
Me neither. Each one of my children, though, and I don't know about your kids, Haley, they were all required in a certain grade. I think it was either grade 6 or grade 7 to do a family tree. And they always came to me and said, which family should I do? Should I do your adoptive family or should I do your biological family? And I always gave them the option. I said, you can do whatever you want. You could do all of them if you want to. They never wanted to do the extra work. But they always chose my adoptive family. It still felt triggering and it still felt untrue.
Haley, do you want to give an award?
I would love to. I'm presenting the Wickedly Hereditary Award to Kristin Chenoweth's episode of Finding Your Roots for delivering the kind of genetic plot twist that would make even the most committed "it's all nurture" crowd start nervously checking their family trees. Between the musical talent, theatrical flair, and uncanny connections to the world of Oz, the episode reminded us that DNA isn't subtle. Listeners, viewers, and pop stars, we would love to hear from you. What award would you give Finding Your Roots or to a character in this episode? Leave your comments for us on Instagram or YouTube. Adoption Pop is podcast journalist Haley Radke,
filmmaker Kristal Parke,
and cultural critic Sullivan Summer. In researching this episode, we relied on A Little Bit Wicked, Life, Love, and Faith in Stages by Kristin Chenoweth with Joni Rogers, ABC Live with Kelly and Mark, and Kristin Chenoweth's emotional DNA reunion from DNAngels.org on YouTube.
If you like what we do, drop us a rating on your podcast app. Find and follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, and let us know what you want us to cover in future episodes.
Join us next week for another episode of Adoption Pop.